Hi there and welcome back to my channel. This is Sean, the honest book reviewer. This is all about April, all the books I read for the month of April. I won't go in order from the first book to the last book. Instead, I break this up into different categories, different sections, based on different challenges I have for the month and for the year, and also arc reads, then also just general reads for the month as well. Let's get started now. The first category is classics. So usually for each month, I have a program that picks 2 random classic books to read. I'm not talking modern classics, I'm talking classics back in the day. And I did have 2 classics to read, and they were Robinson Crusoe and Journey to the West. Now, I have to say, I only read Robinson Crusoe. I didn't have time to read Journey to the West. Journey to the West is 4 volumes, 4 very long volumes. And I'm thinking now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to change the classic thing a bit. I'll still pick 2 random classic books. Well, I won't pick them. The random picking program will pick them. But I only read one, and then maybe the second one if I have time. We'll see how that goes. Maybe some months I'll read both. Who knows? Anyway, this month I read Robinson Crusoe. What did I think? So this book is an adventure style story, a survival style story, and I have to say, have to acknowledge, this is the foundation for other books like this, so you have to give credit where credit's due. So it is a book that encouraged or influenced other stories, other movies, all that sort of thing. And there are parts in this book that have suspense and tension. There's great survival skills being shown in the story. So there's great moments in this book. I won't say it's a terrible book. There are good moments in this story, but there are flaws. So Crusoe is portrayed as an everyman. So he picks up skills so easily. Everything he tries is a success. He can build furniture. He can build a shelter. He can hunt. He can trap animals. He can do all those things. Also, he thinks taming animals means starving them. By starving an animal, capturing it, so he can build traps to capture an animal, he captures goats, or he shoots the mother goat and captures the kid goats, the baby goats, and he captures those goats and starves them because he thinks starving them is taming them. He thinks by starving them, they're so hungry, they'll come to him for food and love him. That's how it's portrayed in the story. I mean, how silly is that? Starving animal means taming an animal. That's just strange to me. Then there are also parrots on this island, and he wants to capture a parrot and teach it to talk. He wants that company. So he captures a parrot, and I think in about a week or so, this parrot starts speaking English. And that's so quick in the story as well, and so silly. So there's many things in this story that are like that, despite the fact it's an adventure story, a survival story, and there are key things in this book that are suspenseful and full of tension. There are silly things in the story as well. And then also in the story, it's full of colonialist attitudes and colonialist themes. I mean, how can it not be when it's written in the 1700s? I think it was written in the 1700s. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. But this book does have colonialist attitudes and themes right through it, even with the friendship of Friday. So in the story, if you don't know already, in this story, other people come to the island eventually, and Crusoe rescues and befriends this guy called Friday. And Friday is a native, I think, from the Caribbean islands somewhere, and they become friends of sorts in this story. And I think it's done well in one aspect, to take 2 people from different cultures, different backgrounds, who don't speak the same language at all, have different ideas about the world, all that sort of thing, and they become friends somehow. So I think in a way that's good. It's shown in the story. It shows, I think, mankind's ability to form connections and friendships across cultures and all that sort of thing. So that was good in the book. But what's not good in the book is sometimes how it's done, and Crusoe's view and ideas and thoughts about Friday as well. That Friday must speak English, that Friday must follow a Christian religion, that Friday must do this and that Crusoe thinks is good and proper. That's in this story. But also it's there because of when this book was written. So have to remember that when you read it. So it's a challenge, I think, sometimes to read this book because of that, because of those attitudes and things and concepts that go through the story. Overall, I'm glad I read this book. It did test my patience and endurance. Even though it's a survival story for Crusoe, I felt like I went through everything with him. But then, this book could have ended with him being rescued from the island, but it didn't. We had this European part after he's rescued, when they're going through the French mountains, I think, in winter, and we have these packs of wolves. I mean, hundreds of wolves. Crusoe thinks that wolves just go around, roam around in packs of 100 or so. He does in this story. He thinks that. And we have these wolves attacking in these great collectives. It's like they're unionized. Like we have unions of wolves attacking Crusoe and his small gang of people as they're traveling through the winter in France, in Europe. And we have that in this section, this unneeded section in this story. I don't know why it's there. Maybe to show that Crusoe is a hero or something again. I'm not sure. Doesn't need to be there. It makes this extra lengthy in a book that's already a bit challenging and a bit tiring to read anyway. So let's find out what the classic picks are for May. Now remember, I only read one of these books as a must, and I'll read the other one if I have time. Let's find out what both of them are anyway. The Count of Monte Cristo, a book I've wanted to read for a long time. Okay, let's find out what book 2 is. Anna Karenina, another book I've wanted to read for a very long time. I'll have to flip a coin, I think, to decide which of these two books is a must read and which is the maybe read if I have time. So let's move on to the country now, the country pick for April. So each month I pick a random country. Well, I don't pick them, a random picky program does, but a random country is picked each month from a list of around 50, and I have to read one book from an author who's born in that country. So for April, the country was France. What book did I choose and what did I think? I chose The Map and the Territory, written by Michel Houllebecq. And I may have mispronounced that surname, I'm not sure. Apologies if I have. Now this book is general fiction, and it's an interesting story. It reads more like a slow burn documentary than a fiction story that's meant to be compelling or gripping and engaging. But strangely, this book is compelling, gripping and engaging. It was for me anyway. It's all about these people, well, one person in particular, and his protagonist. It's about his life, and we learn about his life in general, basically, almost from when he's born right to his death. But we also have other characters coming into his life as well. And the strange thing about this story is all these characters, including the protagonist, go through this story just like they're living their ordinary lives. Big things happen for them. Big things, challenging things. Some people achieve fame, success. Some people have, isolation, all that sort of thing in this story. But when it boils down to everything in this book, every character just feels indifferent to everything that's going on. They welcome things at certain times. They welcome friendships, love affairs, all that sort of thing. But in the end, they all just think that life's about just living it. And in the end, all these characters, they suffer isolation. They suffer lack of friendships, loss of friendships. They suffer lack of connections. They're just ordinary people in this story. Nobody's big, nobody's famous forever. Nobody's just, loud and vibrant and brash all the time in this story. Occasionally a character comes through that may be larger than life for a short time. That character goes, then we're back to just this flat feeling, this feeling of just normality in the story. That's strange in a book like this, because usually you think books we have characters that want to stand out. The author wants something big here and there. Maybe not big right through the story, but kind of big moments in the book that kind of hook the reader in. But this is a book that really doesn't have a big hook, but there's a big shift in tone and feel about 2/3 of the way through. I won't tell you what that shift is, but it's quite a big shift, and it feels bigger because the rest of the story is kind of this flat story, an ordinary story about this guy just living his life, accidentally finding fame, then falling away from fame because he doesn't want to have fame. He wants to be himself. He wants to enjoy his own life in kind of solitude. And then the author puts himself in the story, but it's interesting the way he does it. Doesn't make himself big, doesn't make himself the central focus, doesn't make himself larger than life. He makes himself ordinary in the story as well. So I like that. And there's certain things the way he puts himself in the book that I think just mirrored his life at the time. And I won't tell you what all that is, it might give things away, But this book is interesting and compelling because it just feels like it's about ordinary life, where some things happen, but even though those things are just sometimes marvelous and those things can be celebrated, it's really not, because these people just want to live an ordinary life and they realize life is just ordinary for everybody. Okay, that was April. What's up for May? What country will I have to read a book from in May? Let's find out. So Mexico, look, there's many Mexican authors out there. I don't think it'd be too hard to find a book from an author born in Mexico. Okay, let's move on to the monthly prompt. So for each month, I had a video at the start of the year. For each month, I chose a monthly prompt and the books for those months as well. So one book I have to read and one book I read if I have time. Let's remind ourselves about the prompt for April. Choose a book that deals with time. It could involve literal time travel, be set in a different era, or explore themes of history and change. So for April, I chose 11/22/63 by Stephen King. If I have time, The House on the Strand, written by Daphne du Maurier. So I did read the Stephen King book 11/22/63. Now, this book had a great concept. I mean, traveling back in time to save JFK. I mean, that's a great concept. But execution-wise, this story could have been so much better. It loses so much tension and suspense in the story because when the main character, Jake, goes back in time, there's no conflict in his mind about adjusting to the time period. And I think he's going back like 40 years or something, maybe even more than that. And there's no conflict in his mind about adjusting to that time period. He adjusts so easily. He doesn't really make mistakes, not many anyway. And people don't pick up any mistakes he makes anyway. And it just feels too easy for him. I mean, think about it. If you go back in time, maybe 50 years or so, you can't use your cell phone. You've got to keep remembering, well, I can't use references that people won't remember. I can't use language people don't know about. I have to just put myself in that time period so quickly and pretend I'm from that time period straight away. How hard would it be? Because when you speak, you're using just habits in your speech as well. And those habits are different from habits back in that time period. So it's so easy to mess up in the time period. And in this book, the author doesn't do that, not very often anyway. And this is a King book where it's overwordy. So King has a tendency to be overwordy. I think it's part of just writing on the fly. He's overwordy and then nobody goes there and edits it quite closely. And this book, it's got long stretches that don't need to be there. So I think that just reduces tension as well in the story. Then we have Sadie, who's also a prominent character in this story. Now, for most of the book, she's one thing. She's a bit vulnerable. She's got a quiet strength. She's important in the story, but you have a general sense of who she is in the story, and it's quite consistent. So for that, it's well done. It's not that deep in the story, not her character anyway, but there's just this quiet strength and consistent nature of it being a bit vulnerable, a bit shy. You just feel like she's a bit unsure, maybe unsteady in her life at the moment at that part of the story. Suddenly, she's speaking and acting like this wisecracking gangster, and it's a very big shift in the story. There's no gradual change to that. It's just a shift, a snap decision, a point which is suddenly tough, tougher than just the main character even in the story. She's a wisecracking gangster. She just feels like she's a different character in the story altogether. So that shift, I think, is too abrupt. That's, I think, comes from that kind of writing style King has of writing off the cuff. He may have forgotten to keep his character consistent, I don't know. It's like forcing the character into being something else because she needed to be that to drive the action or drive the movement of that part of the story. So for me, that's strange because his character could have been consistent, but wasn't. But there are some good things in this story. I mean, King does portray the time period quite cleverly and accurately, as far as I can tell anyway. Not having been born or lived through that time period, I can only assume it's quite accurate because it feels like that to me in the story. Then we have this element of Sadie's ex-husband as well, this threat, this outside threat. It's in the background a lot in the story. I like that in the book because it adds tension, suspense, something a bit real, a bit deeper and darker in the story. It needed to be there because this book overall feels very light-hearted. It feels very bright because it has this sense to it. It's almost like you're watching Leave It to Beaver in this book when you're reading it, because there's so much of that feel in the storyline. It's like King wrote this time period and he thought, well, this time period is so much better than what it is now. I'm going to make this, just what we see on TV shows. It's going to be everybody nice, everybody friendly, all these bright things, all these wonderful things. Everything's fresh and new and bright and sunny and vibrant. All these things King put into this time period. Feels a bit off-center to me, feels a bit unbalanced, but it's what King wrote in the book. I think he's trying to show us that he thinks this time period was so much better, was so much more pure, so much just more goodness in that time period than we have now. So having that thing, this threat about Sadie's ex-husband in the background, lurking in the background for quite a long time in this story, that was good. It was a balance in the book. Okay, let's look at May's prompt now. As the weather cools down, pick a book that feels like a warm hug, something comforting, nostalgic, or light-hearted. So for May, I chose Anne of Green Gables, and then if I have time, The Wind in the Willows. So let's move on to the random bookshelf reads now. So each month I have 6 books from my bookshelves I have to read. A random picking program picks them for me. And out of a list of about maybe 150, 180, something like that. So each month I have 6 books I have to read from my shelves to clear more books from my bookshelves. The first book is Genus, written by Jonathan Trigell. Now, this book had a fascinating concept, really great concept. It's dystopian, set in the near future, and it's all about the haves and the have-nots, but with a twist. So the twist is that the haves can manipulate their genes. They can make better improved children for themselves. So now it's not the haves and the have-nots, it's the improved and the not improved. So in this future, that's what it is. And the not improved seem to be pushed into like these conclaves, almost ghettos. And we have that happening in the story as well. So a great concept could have been a great story, but it's really not. Because the characters aren't fleshed out, not developed enough. The characters are there to just push all these ideas and concepts in the story. And it feels like the author had all these thoughts in mind and thought, well, I want to inject this feeling of righteousness in my story, not create a fleshed out characters and fleshed out world, but just have these themes and concepts going through it to push my own point of view. That's what it felt like in the story. That's with every character in the story. What they do, their actions, their thoughts, who they are in the book. It's all pushing these kind of righteous kind of morals or just righteous concepts and themes the author wants to put in the story. Overdone. It's not done in a clever way. I think a more clever way to do this is to have great characters that are deep and detailed, a great setting, a great plot. And in the background, you have these things going through. The characters may still push those ideas, but it's part of who they are really. They're not just designed to push it. It's part of their core makeup and their actions, the plot itself. Everything kind of has that in the background, but in a more nuanced way. But for me, it's too heavy-handed, too overdone. When you have characters, just one-dimensional characters, designed to push those thoughts and concepts, just ruins the book for me. And this could have been so much better. So the next is Candlenight, written by Phil Rickman. Now, this is a horror. It's the author's debut book, and it shows, it really does. It's a folk horror. And with folk horror, you expect atmosphere. You expect kind of darkness. You expect something, deep and dark and maybe even gritty, I don't know, but you expect kind of this atmosphere to almost suffocate you. And in some ways it tries to do that in the story. Now, this book is set in Wales, and it's set in villages, small villages in Wales. One village primarily, but kind of the outside area as well. And in that setting, it should be rich atmosphere, darkness, shadows, the characters could be built around an atmosphere as well. I mean, these are villages, small villages, and we have people coming in who are outsiders. All those tensions going on could have been just so much richer and denser in the story, but it's not. And the main reason it's not is because over a third of this story concentrates on this by-election, this election going on in this area. And when you have that going on in the book, rips away all this tension, atmosphere, suspense, and it concentrates on that instead. I don't know why, maybe to portray this tension between people in Wales and England. That seems to be the only reason, but that has no bearing on this atmosphere in the story. It doesn't develop that and makes it too light. It rips you out of what this book should be, which is folk horror, and instead we follow this by-election in the story. So for me, just a waste in the story to have that in there, a waste of pages, a waste of effort on the author to try to create atmosphere in other parts of the book. I did enjoy the folk horror when it's there. So at the start of the story, the atmosphere is great. Something happens, it's gripping, it's chilling, and I thought, well, this book would be marvellous. And then towards the end, the folk horror does return, which is good. It's dark, atmospheric, it's really deep, there's detail there, it's great depth there, but it's too short because the middle section of this story just is not as good. Not as atmospheric, not as dark. The folklore kind of creeps in here and there, but not enough because that election, that by-election subplot just suffocates the rest of the story in those moments. The next book was Nocturnal, written by Scott Sigler. Now, this is sci-fi horror. And it's quite interesting in some ways, and then in other ways, the book is its own enemy. So basically, this book is about these murders happening in San Francisco. And these two detectives, Brian and his partner, Pookie. Now, I'm not happy with having this character nicknamed Pookie in the story. I mean, it's a bit ridiculous, but anyway. Brian and his partner, Pookie, investigate these murders. And they're very violent murders, very gory murders. And they're wondering, do we have a serial killer on the loose in San Francisco? But we find out that there's this underground society of monsters or creatures, and these creatures or monsters are responsible for the murders. And then something strange happens. Brian starts having dreams. In these dreams, he's there witnessing or even participating in these murders. He sees other creatures as well, kind of people, he thinks are people, but then he sees different elements to them that he thinks, well, they're monsters or they're creatures. That's one element in this story. Then we have this teenage boy called Rex, and Rex is being bullied, quite severely, bullied at school and at home by his mother. And Rex just wants out, he wants a lifeline, he wants help. Now, we find that Rex also has strange things going on in his life. He's having dreams as well. He's drawing things as well as quite an artist. And he draws things happening to people he thinks of as bullies. Or they are bullies actually, but he draws them, violent things happening to them. And then the people he's drawing end up being dead as well, found dead later on. So he thinks he's got this power to create the future. That's going on in the book as well. And we find out there's a link between these creatures and Rex. So all that could have been a wonderful story. And for much of this book, it is. I mean, it is compelling, it is gripping. There are dark elements going on, there's atmosphere. But then the book is its worst enemy. We have juvenile dialogue going on between the police force, between Brian and his partner Pookie. I do mean juvenile. We have grown men talking all the time in ways that are like teenagers talking. It's almost like you expect them to say things like, that's what your mum said, and things like that. Because that's how they talk to each other in this story. So juvenile, and I just think it's overdone, and it rips you out of the story because it's just pathetic really in the book. It's like it's written by a teenager actually when you read those things in the story. And also in the book it shifts in tone. We have horror things going on, we have sci-fi things going on. Then almost it becomes like a superhero origin story. We have things going on for Brian and Rex that make you think, well, they're superheroes and they're changing. It's like prophetic. It's like they're changing and whatever they do is so easy for them. There's big shifts in both their lives for both characters in this book, and they're so dramatic, they're so big, doesn't make sense, doesn't feel real. So for me, that lets the book down as well. I won't tell you anything else about the book other than it is good for the most part, but in some ways this book is its worst enemy. And then there was Restless, written by William Boyd. Now this tries to be a taut espionage thriller or a Cold War type thriller, but it's really not. So this book was quite dull actually. It is past-present split narrative, but both narratives end up being quite dull and have issues. Present narrative, which should drive tension and suspense, is a bit lifeless. The past narrative is more interesting and intriguing, and it follows this character called Eva. And it follows her from being like this naive girl in France and her transformation into a spy for the British. But that transformation is so dramatic and so big. She goes from this naive character who knows nothing about spycraft, and she's kind of like this isolated life for herself. Then suddenly, after a couple of years, she's a super spy. She's better than James Bond, better than, Jason Bourne. She's just amazing, just wonderful, and she can do anything she wants to, even Vanish. So for me, that shift in her capabilities is too abrupt, it's too big. It takes away all reality in the story in her timeline. Then we have this character in the present day timeline who's the son of Eva's daughter, so it's Eva's grandson. Now, this boy, I think in the story he's like 5 or 6. When you see his dialogue and his actions, you would think, without knowing his age, if you didn't know the character's age, you would think this character is like a 70-year-old grandpa who's like a wise sage with wise sayings and everything. You think he has all this wisdom that he's not 5 or 6 years old. I don't like when books do that. When books have children characters or teenage characters and age them with their actions and their dialogue way above their years. What's the point of that, really? So for me, this character is a big letdown in the story because of that. The book itself actually is quite a letdown. From the cover, I expected a kind of, tense and suspenseful espionage thriller. I really did. I expected something maybe set during the Cold War. Part of it is, but for me, this book is a letdown because all those promises, all those expectations were not met. The next is Monument by Ian Graham, and I don't know if the light will reflect on the shiny cover on this book, I'm not sure. Apologies if it does. But this is a grimdark fantasy. And it's quite an early grimdark fantasy as well. So the world in this book is brutal, it's dark. There's grey morality right through this story, especially with the main character. The protagonist is very grey in his morals. You don't know what he's going to do. Very unpredictable in the story as well. And all those elements make a great grimdark protagonist. I mean, he's also selfish and he's violent, unpredictable, and in some ways he can be sympathetic. Not all the time, but some ways it's strange. He can be sympathetic here and there. Not a hero at all, not even an anti-hero really. He's there for himself in this world, so he's a true grimdark protagonist. And the world he exists in feels very grimdark as well. With brutality and its violence, with darkness, with dubious characters, with people all around in this world who seem not to care but anything but themselves. So for me, this is so tense and dark and really reflects grimdark fantasy. And for an early grimdark book as well, it's kind of quite brutal. I mean, it's more brutal, I think, than many other grimdark fantasies that are out there now. But there are still some issues in this book. It gets repetitive in some ways. There are many chapters where the protagonist just loses consciousness. And then in the next chapter, he comes around. That happens more times than I wanted in this story. That gets repetitive when it's overused. Then also just his progress through the book. So we have him on the run, being caught, being found, having a fight, escaping, on the run again, being caught, being found, having a fight, escaping, on the run again. That repeats in the story as well. So those two repetitive things in the book let down this story somewhat to impact my overall view of this story. The end of the book doesn't really feel like it fit the rest of the story. It has the same kind of tone and feel. It is still dark, it's still grim, but it just felt like it was tacked on. Actually feels like the author expected to write a trilogy or a series, and then the publishers or somebody said, well, you won't be. For some reason, this won't be a series, and they told him to change the ending. That's what it felt like, because the ending feels quite abrupt. It feels like it doesn't match what the story was expecting. And I was expecting something different. I was expecting this book may be the start of a series, but it's not. So for me, this was a bit of a letdown as well. But overall, it is an enjoyable story, enjoyable grimdark fantasy. And I do recommend this actually because it's a true reflection of grimdark, and for an early kind of grimdark fantasy book, it's quite well done. The last book from my shelves for April is HMS Ulysses, written by Alistair MacLean. I really enjoyed this, the author's debut book. There are issues with the writing style, with the way it flows in some parts, but it's enjoyable despite that. The thing about this book is it's controversial, and I wondered about that because as I was reading this, I was wondering what was so controversial about this story. Well, when it was first published, many readers didn't want war stories that depicted the true horror of war. They wanted war stories where the heroes, in this case being the British, the heroes were, happy to go to war and combat the evil side, the Germans or the Russians. So they wanted war stories like that, where the people on the British side would go there being stoic, they're being brave, they were courageous, they're happy to go there and fight, even die for their country. That's what they wanted in stories. They didn't want to see the real effects, impacts of war on their own soldiers. And this book has that. This book shows the real impacts of war on soldiers, on your own soldiers who fight for your country. It shows soldiers, young and old, going to war. And in this case, in this book, they're naval officers. But anyway, it shows them going to war, young and old. We have people on this ship who are like 18 or 17. They're going to war, and in this book, they're dying. And they're dying in horrific ways. In this book, this ship also has an enemy in the weather. They're in an area of the world where it's so cold, going outside, you could die from exposure in 1 or 2 minutes. We have waves crashing over where the water freezes, and those ice particles can slice your skin and cut you, all that sort of thing. That goes on in this book as well. So for me, this book really just shows you the true horrors of warfare on all sides of the conflict. And readers didn't want that, not many readers anyway. But this book was successful, started the author's career. So the author did something right, and the author was able to put himself in the story as well because he had the experience. He had experience on ships in battle. So he had that in the story as well. I think somewhere I read that MacLean refused to write another story, another war story, based in the same part of the world with that same kind of concept going through in the book. He refused to do it because he found it too taxing, too hard to relive those moments of his own life. So for me, that just shows you that this book is going to be tense. It's going to be just full of just atmosphere and tension and just written in a way that makes it all feel so real. So for that, this book is a great read. Not a great read because of the writing style or some of the flow, but great because he creates characters that feel real. He creates characters that drag you in through emotions and through just movement and through connections with each other on that ship. He drags you in with all that in the story. So now let's find out what the random picks are from my bookshelves. This House is Haunted, obviously maybe a horror story, who knows? The Devil's Light, I expect this to be some sort of thriller, whether it's political or crime, I don't know. This author writes many different types of thrillers. Faces of Angels. I don't know much about this story, but I have had this story for a long time, so I look forward to reading it finally. Still Life. Again, I don't know much about this story, but I will look forward to reading it. House Swap seems to be some sort of psychological thriller or something. Look forward to reading this as well. The The Swarm. Now I expect this to be some sort of horror thriller story, maybe even sci-fi, so look forward to that as well. So now on to some ARC reads for April, and I think during April I read maybe 6 or 7 ARC books. Let's find out what they were and my thoughts. The first is The Maid Secret, written by Nita Prose. So it's a cozy mystery type story, and it's a third full-length book to feature protagonist Molly the Maid. And I think this author also wrote a novella, which I have read. I have a review of that on my channel, but this author has written 3 full-length novels now featuring this protagonist, and I like this character very much. Molly the Maid is one of my favourite characters of modern fiction. Anyway, this book was disappointing for me. Doesn't really feel like a mystery. It feels like a family drama, much the way the novella did as well. That was more a family drama, but this book is as well. A shame, because this is meant to be the last book featuring this character, and to end this series, on a note where the mystery isn't strong, just a bit of a letdown for me. I still like Molly, I still like other characters in the story, but this book also has this past-present narrative split, and the past chapters almost fill up half the story. And the past chapters don't focus on Molly, they focus on Molly's grandmother. And I'm all for learning more about Molly's grandmother, but the tone and feel of those past chapters didn't match the tone and feel of the present day chapters. And I read these books from Molly's point of view. Molly's point of view is wonderful in these stories. Again, Molly's one of my favourite characters of modern fiction, and I like her point of view very much. And to have so many chapters without her point of view was a letdown for me as well. So overall, bit of a letdown with this book. Grave Words, written by Gerri Lewis. Cozy mystery, and the second book in the Deadly Deadlines mystery series. Now, the protagonist in this series writes obituaries. That's her career. That's the theme, I guess, in this cozy mystery series. The first series I've read with a theme like that. Anyway, this book. The first book in this series was very polished, very well done. This book kind of lacks some of that polish. Doesn't feel as well planned, doesn't feel as well edited, it lacks something. And the mystery, while still entertaining, doesn't feel as good as the first book either. So I'm not sure what's going on there. This book just lacks a bit of polish, lacks something towards the end to give it that lift, to make it better than the draft, for instance. So it kind of feels like this book didn't go through all those processes, and maybe because this is an ARC read, who knows? Maybe this book is still being edited, still being polished, but this book lacked a bit of polish for me at this stage. This book also has moments where we have tangents to character or setting detail. While they maybe build up the world a bit, they feel oddly timed, oddly placed, and in some ways they affect the flow of the story. They impact some tension and suspense. They impact just moments in the story, and when they happen, sometimes when they happen in this book, it pulls me out of the story. So for me, that's an issue, because I want a story to flow well, especially in a mystery. In a cozy mystery, it's all about this character flow, about movement of characters. You have cozy elements and mystery elements just merging together, but that flow should be quite good. It should be written in a way so the reader kind of breezes through a cozy mystery, because that's all that cozy feel. If you don't have that easy flow, you lose that cozy feel. And in some ways in this book, that cozy feel was ripped away because the flow was impacted by these kind of tangents that were oddly timed, oddly placed. And finally, the protagonist in this series. Now, I'm used to the idea of protagonist in a cozy mystery having a friend or a partner in law enforcement. And in this series, the main character does have a boyfriend who works in law enforcement, a detective in a local town. That happens in a lot of cozy mysteries. But it felt odd in the way this main character was reacting to her boyfriend not giving her details on the crimes. And it happens in cozy mysteries a lot as well. But the reaction in this book was quite juvenile. Didn't match the character's age, didn't match her background. Very juvenile, like a teenager. So for me, that was strange. This kind of thing kind of badly written. Not understanding character development or growth in a way in this book. So a few elements in this story that kind of impacted my read, and wasn't as polished as the first book in this series. Something I Keep Upstairs, written by J.D. Barker, a horror. And this book was amazing. Just almost perfect, except for one little thing during the conclusion. This book would have been perfect. Now, this is a horror story that really feels like a 90s horror, like a 1990s horror movie, a teen horror movie. That's what it feels like to me. But, grittier, darker, bloodier, but still that kind of 90s vibe. And I love that in horrors. And this book was outstanding. So essentially what it is, this teenager inherits this mysterious island from his grandmother. This island has a house but a lot of secrets, and he decides to live there. And when he goes to the island, strange things start happening. We have people seeing things that may be not there. We have this kind of dimensional play going on in the story, and people changing dimensions, changing in timelines, what's going on. All that plays off with the horror as well. But it is a real horror story. It's dark, atmospheric. There are things going on that you slowly get revealed as you go further and further in the story. It's one of those books where you have to keep reading to learn more, and it's structured in a way where it drags you on. You want to keep reading. You need to, because you're compelled to read. The way it's written is so compelling and so engaging. I just like this book so much. And the characters in this story are brilliant. All of them. They have flaws, they have doubts. Nobody's perfect. Nobody in the story is perfect. And there's tensions and there's conflicts going on with different characters in the story as well. All adds to the atmosphere and suspense. All adds to the horror. It's one of those books as well where you keep questioning what's going on. You keep questioning who's telling the truth, who's seeing really what's happening in the story, who can you trust, what narrator can you trust as well. So for me, this horror is almost perfect, a fantastic story. Maxwell's Reality, written by MJ Trow, a cozy mystery. And when I read this book, when I decided to read this book, I didn't realize it was book 22 of a series. I don't even think Goodreads had this listed as book 22. Nothing did. Only after I read this did I find out it was book 22 in a long-running series. Now, did it impact my read of this story? I think a little bit it did. I did still enjoy the book. I think I got a viewpoint of the characters enough in this one book, but I think reading from book 1 right through this series, it may make me enjoy this book more. Now, this book is very British in feel. Very British with the characters, with their dialogue, with what happens. Extremely British feel in this story. If you don't like that in cozy mysteries or books in general, you may not like this book. In fact, it's so British that at the end of this book, there's a glossary of terms for people in North America, so they understand what's spoken about in this story. I mean, how strange is that? If a North American author writes a book that feels very North American, there's not a glossary of terms for people in England. Not at all. So I found it quite strange why this publisher decided to put a glossary of terms for a North American audience. I find that quite strange. It's quite telling actually, I think. But anyway, enough of that. I just think this story is interesting. The mystery is good. The characters are good. The setting's good. I like interactions with characters in the story. It feels very British, very quaint in a way, and I do want to read this whole series, so I'll go back and read from book 1 again, and then I may end up reading this book again. The Arts Trail Killer, written by Emylia Hall, cozy mystery, and book 5 in the Shell House Detective mystery series. Now this is a mystery series where it has many elements I enjoy in cozy mysteries. Small town, seaside setting, of course amateur detectives, and then of course great interactions in the cozy elements with characters, regular characters in this series. So all elements I enjoy in cozy mysteries, and the mystery in this book is still enjoyable, not as strong I think as the previous book, and the tone in this book is lighter than the previous book. Now the previous book in this series I thought was quite gothic in tone and feel. In this book, a bit more light. But there are big shifts for characters in this story, in the cozy side. And I think this book is written in a way that kind of create almost tensions and conflicts between characters and make us think what's going to happen next, to drag us to the next book in the series. That's part of those cozy elements going on in the book. The mystery side is quite strong. I didn't guess who the culprit was. In many of these books, I don't anyway. That's a good sign. It means the mystery is strong. I like the journey to get there. The only thing I don't like in the cozy side is is, I think, a lot of focus on Jaden and his new family. I think maybe too much focus. It takes away from other parts of the cozy side, also other parts of the mystery, because it seems like those cozy elements for Jaden, they're bigger, they're more urgent than even the mystery, even a killer out there killing people. So for me, I think that balances a bit off, but overall, this book is still enjoyable. The Staircase in the Woods, written by Chuck Wendig. It's a horror, and it's based on that urban legend about people finding strange staircases in the woods or strange areas where a staircase shouldn't be there. And they think that these staircases may lead to, some sort of paranormal dimension or something like that. So it's based on that urban legend. This book has a cinematic feel to it. It feels like it's written as an option for a movie. It really does. The movement, the scenes, the characters, the way it's represented, all feels like this should be a movie. And maybe it will be. I don't know. The thing about the characters in this book, though, is that the authors try too hard, I think, to make them too edgy. Over edgy. It's overdone. Every character in this book feels super edgy to maybe make them feel more cool or more dangerous, or maybe give them more depth, maybe. I don't know. But in the end, when you have characters, all characters are feeling like that, it feels like it's just too much. Where's the balance? So for me, that's an issue. Also, some action in this book feels a bit repetitive. But it does feel dark, it does feel atmospheric, it's well paced, everything's well timed, great movement in the story. So this book has pros and cons. So for me, it's quite middle of the road as a horror book. But I do like that concept of bringing that urban legend in this story, because that urban legend is something I've been hearing about and hearing podcasts about just recently. So for me, it was quite timely when I read this. Vanish by Shelley Burr. It's a mystery and the third book to feature protagonist Lane Holland. And this series still calls him PI or private investigator Lane Holland, even though in this book and the prior book, he's still in prison. So my understanding is, in Australia anyway, once he gets released from prison, he can't be a PI anymore. But I don't know. I think he can't get a license if he's been in prison. But I'm not too sure about that. Maybe somebody can tell me in the comments. So I think that's the way it happens in Australia anyway. So maybe that PI part of the series title will be dropped in the future. I'm not sure. But anyway, in this book, he's still in prison. But then he's still helping somebody try to solve a crime, a disappearance. So he gets the okay to go to this farm in the outback somewhere in rural Australia, where he's going to learn how to be a farmer through a course in prison. That's great. So he's there. It's quite isolated. We have an isolated setting. We have some strange characters. We get a feeling through his observations and just speaking to people in this book that maybe, this farm where people come and work there, they live there, it's like a commune maybe, or maybe even a cult. We get hints of that in the story. So, Lane's trying to investigate missing persons while he's working there, trying to hide the real reason why he's there. Some people do know he's there from prison, some people don't. And we get hints that some people there may be hiding things about themselves as well. So it feels like one of those places where people go to hide away, hide themselves, hide from somebody, hide from their lives, from their past, whatever. We feel like people go there maybe as a last resort sometimes, or to go there and recover from something and then go somewhere else. The trouble is, some people who leave there end up vanishing, hence the title Vanish. The thing about this is, with the isolated setting, it doesn't feel isolated enough. It feels too easy for our main character to go and talk to somebody in the outside world. It feels way too easy. So for me, that could have been better done in the story. I do like the mystery. I like the concept. I like the way some of this plot travels through the story. But I think that isolated setting with atmosphere could have been better in the story. Could have been more dense. Again, in a book in rural Australia, we have the threat of bushfire. It just seems like so many mysteries set in Australia, in the outback or rural areas of Australia, have a threat of bushfire in their stories. It feels like a constant thing in plots. And it just feels like sometimes it's overdone, overused. So I'm just wondering why so many people do that in their books. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can suggest why it happens so often in Australian books set in rural or outback Australia. Now just 2 general books I read during the month. The first book is Society of Lies, written by Lauren Ling Brown. Now, this has a great concept. The concept has been done time and time again, but who cares, right? If it's done well, written well, then who cares? I don't anyway. Happy to read a well-written book with a concept being done time and time again. I mean, that's why I still enjoy vampire books, or I still enjoy zombie books, even though we have vampires and zombie stories everywhere, in every sort of medium. They're overdone, overused, but if they're done well, they're gripping and engaging. Who cares? So for me, this concept was still interesting. So basically, it's about this woman who's trying to find out what happened to her sister. Her sister was maybe killed, and this happens in college. So this book is also meant to be dark academia. But for a book that's meant to be dark academia, the atmosphere is not strong enough. Unless you think atmosphere is meant to be college students getting drunk, or falling over, throwing up, all that sort of thing. Is that meant to be dark atmosphere for this type of book? I don't know. But if you think it is, then tick that, green tick, this book does that. But for me, that's not the right type of atmosphere for a story like this. There are good things in this book, not all bad, but I wanted more darkness. I wanted more depth. I didn't want to be pulled out of that so often. I just kind of felt like the author was trying to go there at times, trying to make it dark and deep, atmospheric, and then pulled out and said, I don't want to go too dark, too deep. I want to kind of pull out and have this kind of shallow balance in the book. And for me, that didn't work in the story. This was crying out for something darker, something maybe even more dangerous. It didn't happen in this story. We Solve Murders, written by Richard Osman, a first book in a new series, meant a mystery and almost a comedic thriller in some ways. Now, this author knows how to write a mystery, how to structure a mystery anyway. The thing with this book is I struggled with the characters. They were quite shallow. They were hard to get to know in this book, and usually in the first book in a series, we should really get a deep dive into those characters, the main characters anyway. We should get to know them, get to like them, even love them, care for them. They have to make us want to read the next book in the series, and I don't know if readers will read this and think, well, I want to read more with these characters because they feel quite shallow in this story. This book has a great pace. There's no dull moments in this story, but I think the author went for quirkiness over character depth. I really do. A shame, because there are elements with the characters that are really interesting and intriguing. Give us deep characters, give us real characters, real feeling characters, have a few quirks here and there, but make them feel real. Give us something with these characters to care about, because at this moment, I don't care about the characters. In fact, I think they are quite forgettable. The Night We Lost Him, written by Laura Dave. The second book I've read by this author, and I struggled to connect with her stories, with the characters, with the whole plot. I struggled to connect. There are good parts of her books, they're not all bad, but overall, especially with this book, there's just something missing, something I don't connect with. And in fact, I was wondering about this author because the mystery in this story wasn't that strong. And I was wondering, why is this book about more family dynamics and family drama than mystery? That made me wonder, was this author always writing mysteries? And I found out, no. This author started out writing romance and family stories and then shifted into mysteries, because it just seems every author out there wants to write a mystery or a thriller. It just seems like that. We have so many authors in the mystery thriller genre who started out writing romance or family stories or women's fiction or something like that. Then they shifted into mystery and thrillers because maybe mystery and thrillers sell more. I don't know. It just seems like many authors are doing that. And I think some authors shouldn't. They don't have the strength, I think, sometimes to carry a good mystery or a good thriller. And in this book, it makes me wonder about this author. Does this author have the strength to carry out the mystery or thriller that I like anyway? It does seem like many readers out there like her books, but just something in this book just doesn't grip me, doesn't engage with me. It feels more like a family story, family dynamics, or a family drama than a mystery. And in fact, in this book, you learn about one big part of the mystery in the first chapter, or what she calls the prologue. And I don't like when authors keep adding prologues to their books. It just seems like this industry currently just says, call chapter 1 a prologue. Just do it. It just seems like there's so much emphasis on having a prologue in a story, and I don't like it. But apart from that, this story is a bit dull. There's a bit of a mystery there, but one part of the mystery you learn straight away from the first chapter, so that's gone. So what's the point? I don't mind if you learn a big part of the mystery in the first chapter at the start of the book, but the journey to get there has to be engaging, has to be compelling. The characters have to be just gripping, compelling, and engaging as well, and they're not. Nothing about this book kind of gripped me enough to, just make up for the fact that I knew a big part of the mystery in that first page of the story. The Mercy of Gods, written by James S.A. Corey, a sci-fi, the first in a new series called The Captive Wars. And this should have been epic, should have been a great book. I mean, considering this is a pen name for two authors. So we have two authors writing this book. Should have been wonderful. And I think these authors also wrote that series The Expanse, which is also a TV show. So I was expecting big things from this book, massive things, epic things, and this book is marketed as a space opera as well. And it's not a space opera. We don't have those epic battle scenes. We don't have epic drama. We don't have characters that are really engaging and deep, and characters that drag you through the story. We don't have all those things that make for a great space opera. We don't have great things about culture and deep things about detail, world building, all that sort of thing, not there in this story. We have attempts of it, very superficial, but it's not strong enough. So for me, not a space opera at all. This kind of feels like a long, maybe too long prologue for a space opera. That's what it feels like. It feels like overextended, and it almost feels like a cash grab, like these authors are saying, well, we have a series that's very popular with a TV series. Doesn't matter what we write now, people are going to buy it and read it anyway. It feels like that. These authors have written something, extended it out, thinking, let's stretch it out as far as possible. Let's take this concept as long as possible to make more books and people will buy them. I get that feeling with this because this book, being the first in a series, doesn't really compel me to read more in the series, even though I will. I'm a completionist reader, but many people are not. And I have seen people comment that from this book, they won't read more in this series because this book has nothing there that engages them. It's not gripping. There's no great dynamics in the story. What this story is about basically is we have this alien species and they're quite powerful. So that alone, this species is very powerful that can capture, invade, destroy other cultures, other species. That alone should have been a great concept in this story and so engaging, but it's really not because we see hints of what they do. We don't get enough detail about them. It's very mysterious, too mysterious for the first book in a series. But anyway, this species goes to this planet and captures people, humans on this planet. Captures, kills many of them, captures the rest, and forces this group of scientists to experiment and create things for them. They don't know why they're doing it, they have to do it. And they get a sense if they don't succeed or comply, something bad will happen to them. So this book is basically, most of the book is basically these characters working together on an experiment in a lab in this alien spaceship or alien world. That's what it's about. Most of the whole story. The dynamics with the characters aren't deep enough. We don't get deeply enough into who they are to have great dynamics. A great shame because all the action is based around them doing these experiments. We have a few things here and there that are meant to drive tension, suspense. They feel almost comedic more than great tension and suspense moments, and for me that's a letdown as well. So overall, this whole book is disappointing. Hostage, written by Chris Bradford, is a YA action type thriller. It's the first book in a series called the Bodyguard series. Now, I enjoyed this book. For what it is, it meets the brief, and I can imagine if I was a teenage boy reading this, I'd love it, because it's full of action, full of suspense, bit of drama, but one of the great things about this story is the other people on his team. On the Bodyguard team he's part of, those characters are great. They have great interactions, great dynamics. They're well crafted, well created in this first book. You get to know so much about them as well. I think at the start of this book, maybe a bit slow for a YA action thriller. Maybe a long intro for him, joining this bodyguard type company, and then training and learning things and going to his first mission. It's quite a long intro. But anyway, after that intro, we have some great moments of action and suspense and tension. We see some heroic things going on. We see great dynamics between the main character and the person he's protecting. I won't tell you what that is in this story, but it is quite exciting when you get to read about where he goes for his first mission. I think that's quite exciting and a great thing to have as a first book in a series as well. But I do wonder, if you have that as the first mission in a series, where do you go from there? How do you make it bigger or better in the first, second or third book or fourth book in a series? I will find out, because I will read more books in this series, of course. I do have some already from the library to read. Death of a Smuggler, written by R.W. Green and M.C. Beaton. So it's a cozy mystery and book 37 in the Hamish Macbeth mystery series. Now, it is written by R.W. Green, based on characters and ideas, I think, from M.C. Beaton. Characters, yes. I'm not too sure now based on ideas from M.C. Beaton. Maybe she did have ideas for this book, I don't know. Or R.W. Green could be coming up with all the ideas himself. And in some ways I think he may be, because this book lacks things on the cozy side. It lacks that feeling we get from when M.C. Beaton was writing these stories, because when she wrote these stories, we had many characters in Hamish's life and where he lives in the village. We had many characters appearing again and again and bringing life into the stories, bringing depth into the cozy elements and the cozy setting. And in this book, it doesn't happen very much at all. It's almost like these books now ignore most of the characters in the village. We see a few here and there, not in great detail. They don't have huge parts in the story. For the most part, it just feels like that feeling, that quaint feeling, that kind of community feeling we get from this series is not really there now in this series. It's a shame, because this book, this series, was really based on that. One of the strengths of this series, apart from having some good mysteries, one of the key strengths was that community in Hamish's home village. And not to have that in this book is a shame, bit of a letdown. The mystery itself wasn't that great from my view anyway. I just think this is lacking in a few things, and it makes me wonder how many books are left in this series. I mean, how long can this series keep going for? Because it feels like this book is losing something in the entire series, and I'd hate to see this series end on a low note. I'd like to see the last book in this series being something magnificent. This ends all the books I read during April. I wonder, have you read any of these books? What were your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. Any books I've discussed in this video you want to read now? Let me know as well. Also, let me know your favourite April reads. I always look out for recommendations, new books to read, new authors to read. I'm always on the hunt for more books to add to my TBR, so let me know in the comments. On my channel, I review books from all different genres. Check out my channel and subscribe. On the screen now is a link to another video for a book I'm sure you'll enjoy.